Hello everyone, this is Kesharaptorial. So, continuing on with the conversation I began last night with a summary of how cold this winter has been where I live, the March for Life that took place last Friday, and the part hosted by Ben Shapiro, and a little of the, what do we call it? Completely misrepresented kind of a confrontation between Covington Catholic High students and some troublemakers from the Black Hebrew Israelites, and then this Nathan Phillips, Native American elder. I'm not sure how seriously he takes his tribal heritage. He has been known to cry, as the left often cries wolf in their accusations of racism and every kind of phobia you can think of under the sun, which are almost always completely unjustified or completely blown out of proportion. This Nathan Phillips person, that's Ben Shapiro. We're going to talk about the abortion stuff first, but anyway, just to briefly go over, this Nathan Phillips person has a history of crying oppression and racial injustice in taken way up out of proportion events as well. We'll talk about that in time. I do have a number of videos and a number of things to go over before then. But I wanted to begin this time with telling you a little bit about how my individual perspectives on this abortion issue has shifted throughout time. When I first learned about the abortion dispute, and I don't remember exactly when that was, when I first heard of it. Most likely in early high school, but I'm not certain. It might have been a little earlier. Certainly high school was the first time where I learned detail about the for and against arguments. And so when I first heard about them, I was on the, well, abortion sounds like murder side. As I listened to a little bit of both the pro-life and the pro-choice sides throughout a couple of years, this was pretty much throughout high school, I thought the pro-choice side did have some good points to them, but since then, since I've learned just how common and how mainstream that not only tolerance of easy access to abortions have been, but the sheer scale of support that Planned Parenthood has and other programs and activist groups that push abortion, just how widespread abortion is considered an option to an unplanned pregnancy. It's the scale. I have shifted back over to the much more conservative side of holding belief that we really do need to safeguard the sanctity of human life even before birth. It's the scale of abortion acceptance and practice that really turned me away from the pro-choice side. It has become quite frightening, actually. Anyway, that's just to start with how my personal viewpoints have shifted back and forth, and then back again over time. So to continue, I would like to talk about what Ben Shapiro taught about. I'm not going to give the lengthy speech that he did. He is very good at arguing the pro-life side. Oh, didn't want to get that wrong. And so as I've listened to his arguments, they really are very difficult to dispute. The problem with the very common argument that the pro-choice side will bring up is that it's the woman's choice and she gets to decide what she does with her body. Well, The problem is, you know, men still get forced into very difficult labor, wars even. I mean, technically they're not forced, they can sign up, but you do need a military. Men throughout history have actually had very little control over what happens to their bodies, what their bodies are used for when you think about it. And far too few people remember that. So I'll briefly go through some of the counter-arguments that Ben Shapiro gives to common pro-life positions. He hasn't yet brought up that men have actually had have had far fewer choices than most people think. They think that if you're born male, if you're born a man, you have complete control over what your body is used for. Really not true at all. And someone who grew up an ill child, as I did, it really ruined a lot of parts of my development, a lot of stages, not just individual parts, but a lot of stages of development. I didn't get much choice, particularly as a child, over what was done to me. Being a boy gives you no advantage in that. In fact, often less of an advantage because you are expected as a male, even if you're a young child, you're expected to be able to endure things that a lot of people would not ask of girls, or at least would give a lot more sympathy to. And this has origins in just how gender relations work and different amounts of compassion given to boys versus girls work, and that's a whole other discussion in and of itself. So one common argument, another one that I've heard from pro-choice people, is that a human fetus is not an independent human life because it cannot survive on its own outside the mother's womb until only a couple of weeks before birth. So now I'm taking from Ben Shapiro's speech. Again, I'm not going to go over every single counter-argument to pro-choice that he gives, but I'm going to go over some major ones. So he counters the not an independent human being while still in the womb with the argument that infants and toddlers cannot survive on their own without constant care from the parents for several years. And this is true. This last summer, I was helping to take care of my baby nephew and some of my cousin's toddlers, much as I helped to take care of my siblings when they were babies and toddlers. I'm the oldest of 5 siblings, so I've done a lot of baby and toddler care for family members, once or twice for friends, but mostly for family members. Throughout my life since I was 10 years old. My middle sister was born when I was 10. I was too young to help take care of the first one. We're only apart by 11 months. So almost, no? Sorry, a year and 11 months. So almost 2 years. In any case, my middle sister was born when I was 10. My brother was born when I was 16, and then my last sister a little bit later. I can definitely confirm that babies and toddlers are death magnets to themselves. And up until about 4 years old, when they begin to learn some level of danger assessment for themselves, not to a great extent, but some. Until then, they definitely need constant care and rescuing by caretakers. Optimally, this means family members, because daycares are not appropriate places to put children that young into. I suppose what people might be referring to when they say a fetus cannot survive on its own when that would separate them from babies and toddlers is that they're not able to breathe or perform necessary body functions on their own up until the last few days before birth. I don't remember precisely the threshold at which a premature baby can survive on their own with a little bit of help. But this has some truth to it. But what defeats the argument is that pro-choice activists now hold the position that abortion is perfectly acceptable even up until hours before birth. Maybe even afterwards. And I just learned about a New York passing a bill or law or policy. I still have to read and watch that report, but that babies can be aborted up until moments before birth. That is pushing it way beyond acceptability for me. Definitely. So that is definitely blurring any distinction between abortion and murder. That's about as blurred as you could ever make it. So in that instance, yeah, that's at that point, if it's hours before or moments before birth, that turns into murder. Yeah. Now, he also addresses the argument that I've also frequently heard, and another one that I once thought had some credibility, but after learning about the sheer scale of abortion embracing, I've since turned away, is that abortion is acceptable if one is not ready or stable in life enough to raise a child. But as Ben often counters with in his public speeches, which I definitely recommend a lot of those, he's a very good orator, he's a very good explainer of moral positions. And as he says, what people are often talking about by saying not ready is it's inconvenient for me or for us if the men and women who were bouncing in bed together are still together. It's inconvenient at this time to have a child. If that's what they mean, it really does fall upon people to practice responsibility when it comes to sexual activity. Seriously, basic protection and birth control are not that expensive. And while they may not be what you want, the horror brought about by killing a human life because you're not ready or not willing to bear the consequence of having to raise a child because you weren't practicing safe sex, it does come off as morally evil. I'm surprised there's as much acceptance for that as there is. It really does stagger you, or stagger me at least. And there's always the choice to put the child up for adoption. What's standing in the way of a lot of adoptions right now is the ridiculous government bureaucracy and policies that is separating children from families who want children. So with many things, one of the answers would be to cut down on government bureaucracy. But governments like to grow, and past a certain size, they're extremely difficult to deal with. It's just, like many things, it's a mess. There's also the question that women will ask, what if the baby was conceived by rape? Or what about cases where the pregnancy is a threat to the mother's life? And again, I've listened to Ben Shapiro's answers and perspectives from a lot of other people on this matter. The thing is, both of those cases where you have a baby conceived by rape or the pregnancy is a direct threat to the mother's life are exceedingly rare in Western culture. And the hypocritical thing is the movements like feminism and Me Too have now blurred the definition of rape to what was once agreed upon and recognized by pretty much all of Western society as forced sexual activity without the consent of one of the usually two people involved. And it took a very long time for it to be recognized by law, and in many places still isn't, that men and boys can be victims of rape. Yes, they can. And also that it had to be verifiable beyond a reasonable doubt that this is in fact what took place, that rape is in fact what took place. Because, what a surprise, people do lie sometimes. And usually by physical or forensic evidence, because spoken testimonies are also frequently of very questionable validity. Once again, evil people. Once again, evil. It is evil to falsely accuse someone of rape. And the fact that the definition of rape has been so blurred means you don't have a common set of standards to draw upon. Does it fit the actual agreed upon definition? But the problem is there is no more agreed upon common definition of rape and set standards that you have to investigate. Is this what actually took place? What that leads to is the complete breakdown of trust between men and women. And it's near impossible to verify events that may or may not have taken place decades ago because physical bodily evidence fades over time. If you're familiar in any extent with decomposition or with, well, not necessarily decomposition, that's dealing with dead bodies, but with the very short amount of time physical evidence remains on a body, unless the damage is so great that it's impossible to hide. But that's kind of rare because people have an ability to heal. So if you're familiar with that, and I mean, you will be well aware that it's nearly impossible to draw reliable evidence from a couple of months ago, let alone many years. Nowadays, we have cases of people like Christine Blasey Ford, who takes a very faded event from her past that may or may not have happened and points at someone that she or a political party wants to take down, in her case Brett Kavanaugh, this past fall season, and accuses him of rape 36 years before at some unknown and unverifiable time and location, and Democrats and feminists jump on it, rally to support her actions for political gain. This is not giving a care in the world to the fact that they are destroying the life of an innocent man and his family, really out of pure spite, again, to gain political advantage, and for just a level of hatred for their political opponents, and ideological opponents that I was very surprised to see in my lifetime. I thought we had a more heartfelt standard for finding the truth, and watching that fall apart has been really heartbreaking for me over the past several years. We also have the social failure to uphold standards of the process when a young man is accused of rape by a woman on a university campus. Ben Shapiro had Christina Hoff Sommers, an actual heroic woman, on his Sunday special discussion not too long ago, where they spoke about this very tragedy. The definition of rape has effectively become any sexual activity or even any physical contact that the woman perceives as not what she asked for, or later, maybe years later, regrets. Or nowadays, given that every standard of due process has fallen apart, they can just invent something. Yeah, it has become that bad. And by becoming that bad and that blurry, it has done severe damage to relations between men and women, because who can trust each other? Who can trust each other's accounts of what took place in their past or what their standards of consent are? Even if all of this craziness were to end tomorrow, it would still take generations to heal. I'm not kidding. Generations. That much damage has already been done. Now, there is the story that I also wanted to get to of the Covington Catholic high school kids who had attended the March for Life rally, and at the end of the day were wanting to be picked up by the bus. And as they were waiting, a gathering of black Hebrew Israelites approached the boys, shouting egregiously racist epithets at the white teenagers, calling them crackers, telling them to all go back to Europe. Well, white people aren't going to leave North America defenseless. It is the last fortress of freedom we have after Europe invited, really not putting up much of a fight at all, and the political leaders of Europe just brought in all these third world migrants. But by the way, funny thing about the whole standard of rape is the European countries where third world migrants, most of them either sub-Saharan Africans or Middle Eastern Muslims, inviting those people into Western countries, and the actual rape rate skyrockets. So I'm curious. I mean, I have an idea as to why this is going on. It's purely for political gain. It's purely for pushing this one world view and inviting in socialism, because third world people vote for the left, vote for socialism, vote for giant government. You'd still think there would be some motivation from women's rights activists to fight against this, to fight against actual rape cultures. So why do they keep only pointing their finger at the first world, where white people treat their women the best that any demographic ever has, outside of maybe a few very, very temporary historical examples? But, I mean, even those are difficult to verify. So it's a hypocrisy that it is leading to only destruction. We were supposed to have been better than this. We were supposed to have done better than this. We were supposed to have protected our children a lot better than this. I will continue in the next video.